Donald Trump is concerned about Google's search engine. He believes that there is a conspiracy against conservatives and that the search engine only brings up negative content pertaining to Trump. And this is all based on a non-scientific, self-admitted, non-scientific study that was done by an organization known as Pajamas Media. So we'll get to that study in just a minute, but Donald Trump tweeted the following: Google search results for Trump news shows only the viewing reporting of fake news media. In other words, they have it rigged for me and others so that almost all stories and news is bad. Fake CNN is prominent, Republican conservative and fair media is shut out. Illegal? And then 96% of results on Trump. I can't, whatever, I'm done with this. I'm done with this tweet. You guys can read it for yourself.
No, but ending is important. This is a very serious situation, will be addressed.
Right.
That's the president of the United States threatening Google. You better show up with positive news results for me. Even if they wouldn't normally show up in your algorithm, otherwise we will address your company. That is chilling speech and potentially unconstitutional, etc. So let's break this down. There's a couple of layers to this. One is algorithms, and there is a real legitimate issue there, not the one that Donald Trump's talking about. We'll talk about the so-called study, but before we do anything else, I gotta always note for the record that the president is a child. They have it rigged, he says with all caps, of course, for me and others. It's so unfair, okay? And so that almost all stories and news is bad. Fake CNN is prominent. So every part of it reads like a temper tantrum from a 5-year-old.
You're right. So yesterday on the show, Brett and I discussed how Trump thinks highly of himself. It might just be a defense mechanism. He might actually not think highly of himself, but it appears that he does think highly of himself because he fails to comprehend why and how any news organization would write anything negative about him, right? Like, I hate to break it to you, negative search results come up because you do bad things all the time, right? So that's just the fact of the matter. By the way, when it comes to Google's search engine and their algorithm, there are problems. But the problem is not what Trump just mentioned. The problem is that Google does literally the exact opposite of what Trump believes that Google does. So Google, Facebook, a lot of social media giants create what's known as thought bubbles, right? And it's actually devastating. It's not a good thing because people will see search results based on what Google believes you want to see. So if you are reading, let's say, conservative outlets or progressive outlets, the search results will show you what they think your political ideology is. Several months ago, it was revealed that Facebook, if you go into your settings, you can see what Facebook has determined about your political ideology. I did that and it said that I am left-leaning, right? Or I think it said something even more extreme than that, but whatever, it doesn't matter, it was right. It was right, it was based on what I post. And so they put you in these categories based on your political ideology, and then they serve up content that they believe that you'll like and you'll agree with. That's not a good thing, that's a bad thing. You wanna get out of that bubble and understand other perspectives, okay.
So there are legitimate criticisms of algorithms, that is one of them. And by the way, if you're wondering, why do they do that? It is for self-interest, as any corporation would. So why is it their self-interest? Because if they serve you things that you like, you increase time spent on the platform. So if you're on Facebook and they keep serving you things, you're like, ooh, I like that conspiracy. Ooh, I like that one too. Oh my God, I think Obama is an alien, right? And you spend more and more time on Facebook. If they serve you things you don't like, you click out. So they're only doing it because of human nature and to maximize profit. Now that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do, but you should be cognizant of those real issues. Another real issue with the algorithms, I talked to a UCLA professor on TYT interviews, which you should check out. And he made a great point. He's like, look, it's generally men, young to middle-aged men in Northern California that write all the code for these algorithms. You know, smattering of code writers in other places. There's some women, and it is at this point mixed race, Asians, whites, South Asians, etc. Right? But that small group of men pretty much set the culture for the world because the algorithm becomes the culture. And so those are really interesting conversations about algorithms instead of me no like algorithm, it bad, it not say nice things about me. No, no, you schmuck. That's not how it works.
No, but it's even worse than that, Cenk, because he's basing that emotional reaction on a non-scientific study by an organization called Pajamas Media. And by the way, the person who ran this study, she admitted that her name is Paula Bullard. She admitted this is non-scientific, but nonetheless, she made a big deal about it. So let me tell you how the study was done. When she searched for Trump within Google News, within the first 100 results, CNN appeared 21 times, the Washington Post and NBC News 11 times, while right-leaning sites like the Wall Street Journal appeared only 3 times and Fox News twice. So she's arguing, would you look at that? I go to Google News, I type in Donald Trump, right, or Trump News, and what comes up is a bunch of establishment news organizations. Yeah, guess what doesn't pop up? The Young Turks doesn't pop up. Are we gonna run around and say, oh, they have a progressive news bias? No, they have an independent news bias. Because of course CNN's gonna pop up, of course NBC is gonna pop up. They consider those news organizations legitimate, whereas independent news sources are considered illegitimate.
Well, look. No. Let's be fair, because that's a really that's an open question that I'm very curious about. So she says not only did Fox News and Wall Street Journal not show up that much, but she says PJ Media didn't show up. I got bad news for you. There's a good reason for that. Okay, nobody knows PJ Media. Almost nobody goes to it. National Review didn't show up. Weekly Standard, Breitbart, The Blaze, Daily Wire, Hot Air, Town Hall, Red State. All these conservative sites didn't show up. But we did our own study, and I guess now it can be called a study too, because we did the same exact thing she did.
It was non-scientific, but still.
Right, but no, they're calling it, but now The Hill and all the other newspapers are, like, they explain it's not scientific, but they then keep referring to it as a study.
I know,
right?
I know, yes.
So anyway, we did the same study and the Young Turks didn't show up either. By the way, you're just Googling Trump. That's super hard to show up in the first 100 results. And now I use us as an example, partly because of course we're familiar with us, etc., but because we're also the largest online progressive network. So that's a fact. And so it's not like, hey, BJ Media that nobody's heard of, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing that certainly could show up in results. And my guess is if you did it on YouTube, you get different results and we might show up there because of our size, etc. But our point is, to me, the really interesting question is, do they have a whitelist or not? Okay, they say fervently that they do not have a whitelist. If you don't know what okay, now you think they do, I don't know. A whitelist, if you don't know, is obviously the opposite of a blacklist. So blacklist means you're banned. A whitelist means you are more heavily promoted, okay? So if they have a whitelist, it is probably because the mainstream media put enormous pressure on them.
They did.
Okay, you have to be legitimate. And the only way you're gonna be legitimate is if you make us more money.
No, but they have done that. This is not, by the way, this is not me trying to spew some crazy conspiracy theory. They have done that, and the mainstream press has done that not just with Google, they've done it with Facebook, they've tried to do it with YouTube, and they've succeeded to some extent, right?
Well,
and they've done it indirectly through this whole fake news debate, right?
No, again, let me be clear. Has CNN, et cetera, put on pressure like that? Absolutely, and so is the New York Times, Washington Post, et cetera, right? Has Facebook and YouTube succumbed to it? Well, they're two totally different organizations and there are gradations of it. So one thing that they can do is they can give money to certain programs and not give it to certain programs. And so that's one way of doing it, right? Another way of doing it is actually affect the algorithm. Now, my guess is, and now at that point, that's the part we don't know. You don't know if they have a whitelist. And I actually am as skeptical as I am about the mainstream media, et cetera, and here we're trying to give you all the nuance here and look at it from both perspectives. I don't want them discriminating against anyone, against us or against the right wing. I believe in the free marketplace of ideas. I believe we will maul them, and we have mauled them. Just let us have at it, Hoss, okay? So, but I think Google doing a whitelist for their algorithm would be very surprising to me. That messes with their core product, which makes billions upon billions of dollars, and it does it by feeding you the things that are most likely to give you the search results you want. That's how they crush their competition. It would be very foolish on their part, and I don't think they're that dumb to go and create a whitelist for their search algorithm, which is the very core of their business. So I could be wrong, but that's where the open question is. See, this is an interesting conversation about the algorithms. Not, they know like me, they rigged system against Trump. No, they don't. They're not going in there and going, okay, make sure that you put negative results for Trump. That is preposterous. There's no way they're doing that.
One other thing that I want to mention, I am so sick and tired of this nonsense regarding CNN being left-wing news. Are you kidding me right now? So CNN, the same cable news network that gave Trump unlimited free advertising during the last election, they're the left-wingers. The ones who refused to go to Bernie Sanders' speech and instead went to Trump's empty podium waiting for Trump to show up, that's left-wing news, really? The same cable news network that had Scotty Nell Hughes on regularly, but did not have a progressive counter, person to come on and debate her. They had me on once. Once, okay? Brian Stelter had me on once with Scotty Nell Hughes. I crushed it. Never got invited back again, okay? But Scotty Nell Hughes kept making appearances on CNN. But it's not me being bitter. I don't care about appearing on CNN. What I do care about is actually debunking this nonsense about how CNN is left-wing news. One other thing, Corey Lewandowski, what happened to him? Did he get hired as a contributor at CNN? I believe he did.
No, you guys don't, look.
Come on.
Now you can say, hey, today Donald Trump is president, so of course we have to have Donald Trump supporters on CNN for balance. That's what they would say, right? But wait a minute. He wasn't president during the primaries. He wasn't president during the general election. Even if you want to grant him the general election, he got $2 billion of free media during the primaries. Whereas Bernie Sanders from the network news got 1/16 of the coverage of Donald Trump. Trump got 16 times the coverage of Bernie Sanders. So sometimes there are biases, but they're biases that come from places that are understandable. They're not right. But there's groupthink. There's groupthink in cable news. There's groupthink in Washington, D.C. Oh, Donald Trump is entertaining and interesting. Now, why does the guy who runs CNN think that? He's Jeff Zucker. He's the guy who hired Donald Trump to host The Apprentice when he was at NBC. So of course he thinks Donald Trump is interesting. He has a history of getting ratings from Donald Trump. He doesn't give a damn about the national discourse. He doesn't care about being fair to progressives, okay? So you could have a debate as to how they should have done that coverage, and I think that it's a fair debate as to whether the groupthink biases the national media outlets against progressives like Bernie Sanders, and by the way, against conservatives. And so radical conservatives, I think there's a good reason to be against them, but they're outside of the mainstream, and the establishment news has a particular point of view about them. But what is not legitimate is saying Google goes in and writes code saying, we hate Bernie Sanders, make sure you only bring up the negative stories about him, or we hate Donald Trump, only bring up the negative stories about him. That is preposterous. As much as I like Bernie Sanders, there's no reason to believe that Google's doing that. If you say editors at the Washington Post have a certain worldview that then gives them a perspective that is against Bernie Sanders or against Donald Trump, that's an interesting and legitimate debate, not whether Google is rigging their algorithm against these politicians.
Finally, Larry Kudlow, who is Trump's economic advisor, addressed whether or not something might be done about Google and its search engine. Take a look.
Larry, the president said this morning he's unhappy, separate topic, with Google and the search results that are coming up, and he said that there could be consequences coming Google's way. Does the president believe, or does the administration feel that there needs to be some form of regulation for Google, or what exactly was the president referring to?
We'll let you know. We're taking a look at it. We'll let you know.
So we're taking a look at it. My guess is Larry Kudlow had no idea what they were talking about.
I hope so.
And he's like, he tweeted something again. Oh yeah, we're taking a look at it.
Yeah.
But the consequence of that is not good. When the top's chief economic advisor, the president's chief economic advisor says, the president has an insane conspiracy theory against this particular company, well, we're gonna look into them.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and basically threatening consequences against that company. It presents First Amendment issues. It presents a lot of issues when the government is taking action against what they perceive to be their political opponents.
Never miss another TYT video by ringing the bell below. You'll get notified whenever we publish something new. And don't forget to join TYT and download the TYT Plus app today. Download the TYT Plus app on your phone or head over to tyt.com/join.